This is the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast.
Exclusively on the Hurrdat Media Network.
Tell it to me straight up.
Hello, and welcome into the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast, proudly part of the Hail Varsity Network. I am Greg Smith, your surprisingly not still hungover from the Kentucky Derby festivities friend. Today, I'm joined by Steve Marik, staff writer of Hail Varsity. Steve, thanks for being on, man. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Greg. I'm great. I did not have the horse racing festivities that you apparently did.
Yeah. So next year, you and Casey are going to have to come over. We're going to have to do this thing up. Hopefully there's no baseball. Because what we decided to do this year, my wife and I, we had been like, this has been a long-standing thing. And I've actually talked about this on the show before, I think last year around the Kentucky Derby. We had planned on having, because we really like the Derby, we were going to have like this big Derby party and like have people come over, they dress up, you wear hats, we're going to have bourbon, we're going to have all sorts of stuff. But that was like, then COVID hit. And so then the race got pushed back that year, and obviously we're going to do it. And then it's just been weird. So we just haven't done it yet, but that is in the works for us at some point. And so what we did this year was we just had our own little biscuits and bourbon deal where we had two different types of old fashions. I didn't go mint julep because I just she doesn't really like mint. So I would have just been drinking them myself. And we made two different types of biscuits. But we started drinking the bourbon and the old fashions way before we even started prepping the food. Yeah. And so we had to take a little break. It was a deal. We made it through, though. I did make it to see Rich Strike win, and what ended up being a really great race.
Yeah, I'm not a huge horse guy, but how can you not be on Derby Day? So I kind of just followed along as much as I could. And yeah, the video of Rich Strike winning that thing was pretty crazy. I don't know if I've seen anything really like that about how quickly he came up from behind and won that thing. So that was really cool.
Yeah, it was definitely an awesome race. Always a fun day. But each week of the show, we have a couple of segments that are mainstays of the show. The first one is called Coach Speak, where we go over something that a coach, player, or talking head said, and we give you the straight up breakdown of what they meant.
Coach Speak to Real Talk.
This week comes courtesy, it's a little remix. It comes courtesy of Nebraska baseball coach Will Bolt, who actually had this to say after the team's series loss against Iowa previous to this weekend. And I'll explain why this relates to this past weekend in a second. He said, quote, "I thought we played at an extremely high level this past weekend. That's what I told the team. You're not going to win every game. You just have to put yourself in position to play good baseball. If we do that down the stretch, I like their chances." Now, after that series loss, Nebraska had another huge series this weekend against Minnesota, in which they lost the series and lost 2 out of 3 over the weekend. Steve, you were covering the team. What does all of this mean? And what does it mean that the team then went out again in a must-win series and lost the series again?
Let's break that down.
Yeah, so you brought up a good point with what Coach Bolt said about the Iowa series, because I do think that they played really well. They took Iowa, which is one of the better teams in the conference, to the ninth inning basically, in the two losses that they wound up doing against the Hawkeyes. But yeah, they played well against the Hawkeyes. They blew them out in that first game of that doubleheader, but then just played them tough. But it kind of led you to believe that maybe they were starting to turn the corner. And then when they go to a place like Minnesota, last in the Big Ten, a really struggling baseball team, you thought that there was a chance that they could get out of there with at least 2 wins, maybe even a sweep. Mm-hmm. But boy, that did not happen. Obviously, they're just. There's no consistency with the program right now. The offense really, really struggled to score runs on a pitching staff, on a Gopher pitching staff that was not really that great. I think their team ERA was over 6 coming into that game, and they just could not. There was a stretch of 14 innings where Nebraska's offense scored 1 run, I believe. Just going back from that Saturday night 12 inning game. So yeah, it was not a really great way to rebound and kind of build off of what was a series loss to Iowa. But like I said, I think they still played well and showed that they have the capability of playing up to some really good opponents. But boy, they're also like playing down to their competition also. And we saw that this past weekend at Minneapolis.
Yeah, and it's one of those things to where the theme of the season to me seems to be the inconsistency that Nebraska baseball has had. That and the fact that like it's rough because they had such high hopes coming into this season, and obviously we're way into it now. Of them not living up to those expectations, being ranked in the preseason and all of that, and having so much hope coming off of last season. You had so much interest with kind of the young kids coming in as well. Mm-hmm. Like, so why do you think that the team has just been so inconsistent and up and down this year?
Well, I think it's because to me personally, I think you have to look at the offense and how they're not really scoring. They're getting some solid pitching, some solid starting pitching, and the bullpen. Some of the guys coming out of the bullpen have had really nice seasons. But if you look at how the offense stacks up compared to everybody else in the conference, they're last. Nebraska is last in the conference in team batting average. They are, I have it written down here, they're first in strikeouts. So it's just, those are two categories that you do not want to be like last in, and they're last and first in both. So it's just not, the consistency isn't there. The run scoring isn't there. Sometimes I feel bad for the Nebraska pitchers out there like Shea Shanneman, Emmett Olson, Dawson McCarville's had kind of a rough stretch recently, but Cody Frank has also been really stellar on the mound. Those guys are doing work. They're doing their jobs, but they're just not getting run support behind them. And yeah, it's just the inconsistency from the offense is kind of the biggest culprit. So it just kind of makes you think like those guys off of last year's team who did really, really well, they're gone now. Maybe they meant more, offense and maybe even as a leadership standpoint, even coming from a leadership standpoint, I think that's just kind of the team is struggling to maybe have that leadership and kind of, for a young team, there's a lot of young guys playing. I think that's kind of a big deal.
And that's where, and it's interesting too, because I think that sometimes in sports, this happens a lot we'll get to it in a little bit, but it's also happening in football where you have on the defense for football, you have a lot of veteran guys that played a lot of snaps that have left that team for various reasons, mostly due to graduation and going on to the NFL. And you kind of say, okay, well, we like the talent coming up behind them, but it's not always so easy. It was similar in baseball. You like the talent kind of coming up behind them, but sometimes it's not so easy to just plug those guys in. And you kind of, and I think it's natural for everyone, you can kind of skip over just how much it means to have that kind of veteran presence and those guys that have been there, done that, who are also talented, and the value of getting those games under your belt, right? Like there's just no real replacement for having that experience. So I guess so from here now, with Nebraska having lost that series, back-to-back series losses now, where are they at in terms of the Big Ten tournament and what they have to do to then get in and try and make some noise?
Yeah, so they're not totally out of it right now, but it's bottom of the barrel. Like you need to start winning right now and don't put your kind of hopes in other people's hands here. So they're tied right now with Northwestern for 9th in the conference. And as we all know, 8 teams qualified to make the Big Ten tournament. So yeah, they're tied with Northwestern right now. And I think Northwestern's last 2 series, they play Purdue and Minnesota. So Purdue is 8th in the conference right now, I think, and they have a losing record. They're 7-9 in the conference, I think. So who knows how that series is going to go. Northwestern has been scuffling of recent. They've just got swept by Ohio State, which is kind of a poor look for the Wildcats because Ohio State's not that good either. So Northwestern's got Purdue and Minnesota coming up, and Nebraska is playing a pretty good Illinois team who's a sure lock to make the conference tournament. And then after that, Michigan State, who is like Nebraska and needs some help to work up and qualify for the conference tournament. So yeah, anything could happen right now, but boy, if you're Nebraska, you really wish that you could come out of Minnesota with 3 wins instead of just 1.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. And it's one of those where it feels like you'll look back at the end of the year if you happen to just miss by like a game or something like that. And you're like, boy, if we had only gotten 1 or 2 more here or there, especially that weekend series against Minnesota, it's tough. We'll see. We'll keep an eye on that because I still like the future prospects of this team. I think that they've got a really bright future. You just got to make it work in the meantime, right? And I think it would be important for this group of guys to really put it together and then kind of make that push to get into the tournament to at least see what can happen. But one of the other things, Steve, that I definitely wanted to get to you or get to talk to you about here today is I found something really interesting. So we talked about this a little bit in Slack, but I think you had to do baseball and we couldn't really get deep into it, is that we saw some Vegas odds come out for Nebraska that had them at 7.5 as the over-under for Nebraska's win total. And I'm still kind of chewing on that, to be honest. And we're just going to workshop this here. That's what we do on this podcast, right? It's my show. So one of the things that I find interesting is we've had this kind of up and down feeling when it comes to Nebraska football this offseason. There have been things that have happened, the O'Shawn Mathis news, that make you go, oh, okay, they could have something cooking. The Devin Drew news kind of is in that same realm. Mm-hmm. And then you hear like coaches talk about, say, the offensive line being a work in progress, or Scott Frost comes out and he's angry about practice. Like, and you're just like, oh, I just don't know. We haven't seen anything. So it's just been an up and down offseason. Then the spring game happened and no one knows what to do with that. So I guess this is a temperature check on May 9th, Monday, May 9th for you. Like the over under 7.5 right this second. How are you feeling about that?
Boy, 7.5. I don't know. I'm going to have to go under on that. I don't know if I'm in the minority or not on that, but yeah, there's just still a lot of like questions. Like I just got done writing a piece for HailVarsity.com, and it's going to come out later this week, that I was kind of breaking down the defensive line and what's coming back and what's being added. And sure, like O'Shawn Mathis, like that guy's a stud on a Big 12 football field. He is. He can get to the quarterback. He's shown that he can do that. Devin Drew has played a lot of snaps and played a really tough position in a three-front defense in Texas Tech for 2 seasons. So I'm just wondering how their games are going to translate from playing against Big 12 pass-happy spread offenses of the Big 12 to the Big 10, where they're going to bring in more tight ends, maybe a fullback sometimes, and you're going to have to try to run. You're going to have to try to stop the run. That's where I'm wondering how this defense is going to be, because there's potential to be a pretty good pass rushing team, I think, with Mathis, and just kind of having him out there. Maybe that creates more one-on-ones for a guy like Garrett Nelson, for a guy like Caleb Tanner, who you could stick out there too on like a 3rd and long situation. So you'll have like Mathis, Nelson, and then throw Caleb Tanner in there too. I mean, Eric Schneider's got to be, having a really fun time trying to draw up ways to get those guys on the field at the same time. But it's those 1st and 2nd down situations where I think our Big Ten offense is going to look at Nebraska's defense and kind of, all right, let's run at this thing and see if they can consistently stop the run in the middle. So there are just a lot of questions. And then on the offense, it's like, it's a new system. It's Mark Whipple's system. It's a new quarterback for the first time in 4 years here. A running back needs to emerge. A leading receiver needs to emerge. Is Travis Vokolek able to step on the field and kind of be that leader, kind of step into Austin Allen's role? I don't know. There's just a lot of things to be seen yet. And for me to go above a 7.5 win, that's a lot of confidence in that they're going to do it. And so I would just I'm not saying that they're not able to do that, but I do want to see it first on the field before I say I'm going to go over with 7.5 wins.
The enormous counterpoint to that, and I don't disagree with anything that you're saying there. I think we're in line in a lot of that, almost all of it, is that the schedule. And I hate being that guy. I really and I didn't and I'm to be totally honest, and you guys have known this has been going for a couple of years. You've heard me say this before. I don't like blaming a tough schedule for things going wrong. I don't really like being like, oh, it's a soft schedule, so they're going to do it's just tough. You got to play the teams that are in front of you, and Nebraska needs to focus. And this has been true, definitely for the last handful of years. Focus on the team that's in front of you. It doesn't matter who you're playing. You never know what that team is going to be like, because Nebraska has had these quote unquote tough schedules and these runs where it seems like it's going to be really tough, and maybe those teams have an injury or two or are disappointing and they're not as good. And you've seen it on the flip side of that too, where teams are better than expected too. So you just never know when it comes to the schedule. But that being said, Nebraska's schedule to start the season does set itself up very nicely for a team to really be able to kind of get some runway. And I think that they're going to need that. You were talking about all those different question marks that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. There are a lot of them. But when you start the season, your first 3 games are Northwestern, who was not very good last year. We're counting on that Pat Fitzgerald bounce back, but they've got a ton of questions. And I think we're going to get more into that as we get closer to the season. Like, they've got a lot to replace as well. But Northwestern is the first game. Then North Dakota, Georgia Southern, even Oklahoma is a team that is going to be a high variance team, right? I've seen some stuff that has them in the top 5 preseason, which is nuts to me. And right, I see that look. Derek Peterson was actually the one that told me that, and he showed it to me, and I was like, what is going on? But I've seen it where they could be preseason not ranked, right? And I think that's probably a little bit more realistic. But you also get that team at home, right? And then you've got Indiana, Rutgers, Purdue, Illinois to close out October before you hit that real tough stretch where you play Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. And who knows where Nebraska is at the end of the season, because if you start off very well, and this is a team that I'm still waiting to see what happens for Nebraska, if they actually do start well and get some momentum and some confidence, because that's one of those things. We talk about pass rush being something we haven't seen them have. We haven't seen them have that confidence either, because, oh, by the way, Scott Frost at Nebraska has not won 3 games in a row.
Yeah.
Like, let that sink in. Scott Frost at Nebraska has not won 3 games in a row as coach. So we do not know what would happen if this team actually got on a roll or got some wind under their sails, I think is how he described it a couple of years back. And so there's just so many questions, but I do think that the schedule really helps them. That being said, 7.5 is still a high number to me. Like, I would be uncomfortable. That's so many wins for a program that has not had that many in a long time. Like, it's just been a while.
What I want to make, if I could do a counter to your counter,
okay,
if that's possible, with the easier schedule, yeah, it does kind of set up nicely for them to potentially have a good start to the season. But what I really want to see from this program and from Scott Frost as a head coach is to have his team win the games that he's supposed to win.
The teams that you have more talent than on paper, which is a lot of these teams. Yeah.
The Illinois, the Purdue's, he hasn't shown that he can consistently beat those teams in the West that he needs to beat. So until he does that, I'm not going to go out on a limb and kind of pick them. So Northwestern is a great test right now, because on paper it looks like Nebraska should go to Dublin, beat Northwestern, come back, have 2 non-conference wins right before a big game with Oklahoma, who, like you said, has a ton of questions themselves.
Yeah, they could be really good or they could be really bad. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen with them.
I have no idea how Dylan Gabriel is going to transition to Big 12. I have no idea how that's going to go. But so it starts off with, that's why, we talked about this question in a mailbag a couple weeks ago, I think. Is Northwestern kind of a winner must-win game, right?
Yeah.
I think it is. I think it's a game that, people look at and say, okay, Nebraska is better than Northwestern on paper. They need to win that game. If they don't, that's going to put such a damper on the season, just like it did last year in Champaign against Illinois. So, man, I just really, for me to go up and kind of go over or think they're going to be around 7.5 wins, you need to show it against the teams that you were supposed to beat, and they haven't done it for 4 years now. So.
But that actually gives a great path to getting there, though. If you really think about it, and I honestly, if they beat the teams that they, in theory, should be expected to beat this season, and especially in that first run of the year, they can hit that. It's just you don't have the confidence that they're going to do that because you haven't seen it, and that's, they call it fair or unfair. It just is what it is at this point. But I also think it goes to what has been kind of the overall theme. I think from a lot of people listening to this, a lot of the fan base are improve it mode, right? They don't want to hear so much about kind of the offseason victories and all of that. I know that becomes like this running joke, but I think that in a way it's true, because I think people are just waiting to see what the product ends up being on the field. The way I describe this offseason for Nebraska is that Nebraska has done almost everything in its power to put itself in position to have a more successful season. Now they have to just go out and do it. Now we've got a little bit of time, right? You knock on wood, no injuries or anything like that. Hopefully you get even a couple of more additions. But I think that if you had asked me at the end of the season when the final buzzer hit for that Iowa game, if they were going to be able to do some of the things that they've gotten accomplished this offseason, I would have told you there's no way in the world. If you just say, would they have been able to get a Casey Thompson? Would they have been able to get Mickey Joseph to come here? Would they have gotten O'Shawn Mathis? I told you no way. And so, but the fact they've put themselves in position and they can have a fairly successful season. The degree of that is going to be kind of the thing. And to do that, though, Northwestern to steal a line from James Franklin. You got to focus on that first team that they have on the docket. We'll have plenty more on that leading up to the season because every week we end the show with my favorite segment of the week called Put Them on Blast, where we basically put someone on blast for something that they did or said.
Put them on blast.
I'm going to go first on this one. Antonio Brown. Listen, and there's a lot of different ways that you can go with Antonio Brown, but I saw a clip a couple of days ago and made sure to save it where Antonio Brown, and forgive me, I don't know the show that he was actually on and talking about this, somehow got talking about Colin Kaepernick and how Colin took the money in the settlement from the NFL, therefore he needs to go away, and he was trash, and he's not seeing Colin out here working. And I just don't understand. Like, there's so much there, so many layers. Number one, I just want to say this up front. Like, no one appointed Antonio Brown as the person that needs to be the spokesperson for speaking on issues. Like, we don't need more Antonio Brown thoughts on various things. Sorry, Antonio. Number two, what do you mean you don't see him working? He literally just had these open tryouts to throw to receivers. That just happened. Was that not even a month ago that happened?
That was Michigan's spring game.
Yeah, I know the time flies, but it wasn't that long ago when that happened, and there were receivers that went out there and did it and said he looked pretty good. Number three, didn't Antonio quit on his team in the middle of a game? Didn't that just happen? So I just don't know, man. Antonio Brown, you have to go on blast. I just don't understand why. I do kind of understand why he needs to be so outlandish and has to continue to keep himself in the news. And obviously I'm talking about him, so he's keeping himself in the news. But no, Antonio Brown, for all of those reasons and many, many, many more, you have to go on blast.
Yeah, that's a good one, and I'm never going to try to break down what goes through Antonio's head there. So that's a good one. For my put him on blast, I'm going to go with Sacramento Kings owner Vivek Ranadive.
Okay.
For picking the right head coach in Mike Brown to lead the organization for the next 4 years, but he needs to go on blast for having Mark Jackson as almost winning this job. I mean, oh my gosh, I don't know, as probably one of the only Sacramento Kings fans in this state, I assume I am. I would have had a mental breakdown if it was Mark Jackson. I'm super glad that it's Mike Brown. Give me Mike Brown. I like that guy. But boy, hand down, man down, I wouldn't have done well with that.
I feel like here's the thing, and I'm laughing because I told you this. The sole reason why I wanted Mark Jackson to get that Sacramento Kings job is to keep him the hell away from the Lakers job. And I have very little faith that he's not going to turn up and end up being that guy. Now, I saw the thing that the Lakers interviewed Terry Stotts here recently. He's okay. I still want them to just wait it out and talk to Nick Nurse. I still think that needs to be the thing. And that's one of the things not to turn this into, and I said this every week, I'm going to not yell about the Lakers, and I do it anyway. One of the things that's extremely frustrating about cheering for the Lakers is that they're always linked to these really big names, and they have realistic chances at getting them. And then those guys end up kind of doing a deep dive into the organization and going, ooh, no, I don't want to be around there, right? And this happens all the time. You saw the thing, what was the coach? Oh, the coach of the Jazz, Quinn Snyder. There were the reports that he was interested in the job, and then kind of did a look and, no, you got guys that you got Kurt Rambis sits in on coaches meetings. What? Who does stuff like that? What if the Lakers were actually just competently run? I don't what would happen then? Well, they win all the time anyway without it. What would happen if they were well run?
I don't know if you agree with this, but we're kind of in the same boat. I mean, I'm sure if anybody really kind of looks inside what's going on in Sacramento, that's going to be boy, I don't want to do this with this guy who owns a team who looks like he knows nothing about basketball and lets his son run some stuff who knows nothing about basketball. So that's what I'm dealing with over there in Kingsland. So, but yeah, the Lakers situation is always hilarious for a Kings fan in the offseason.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't get like no one here is like pouring any out for me. Like no one wants to like give me sympathy on this. It's fine. It's totally fine. I'll take it from you guys. Anyway, and I almost did it. I almost made it through the episode without yelling about the Lakers. And we'll end up doing a whole episode if they hire Mark Jackson. Just be warned now. It'll be one full put them on blast for Mark Jackson. But that's going to do it for us this week. Subscribe to the show everywhere you listen to podcasts. Rate us, leave us a 5-star review. If you only leave 4, I'm inclined to think you're a hater and nobody wants that. Make sure you're checking out the other podcasts on the Hail Varsity Network, the Mind Your Own podcast, Varsity Club, Nebraska Preps postgame show, and the Hail Varsity radio show. Also, check out the Hail Varsity YouTube page. I'm back on there with another recruiting question video of the week. Be back on there later this week with another football video with Steve Marik as well. You can get at us on Twitter at Greg Smith HB, at Steve_Marik. We will catch you guys next week.